Good morning, Ratman. I'm Che, and I'm not having a good time trying to get this sword out of this stone, and I have to host this show. And the lady face down in the lake is my co-host Corgi, who isn't here today as she's currently face down in the lake. Someone really should have checked if she could swim. I wrote that.
I can't.
I wrote that intro because I didn't think Corgi would make it for this episode, but she did, and it was too good not to use.
Well, I mean, I can still pretend to be sick if you want.
Yeah. Just go drown yourself, but bring your microphone set up so we can hear the desperate bubbles for air.
The best part is, even if I'm drowning, it would sound better than my current mic.
So today's episode is brought to you by rats. Give them food.
They don't spread plagues, they just spread good vibes. And a little bit of the plague. But don't worry about that part.
So you know how I never laugh at your jokes?
Yeah, I don't blame you.
I remembered something the other day where I was deliberately going to make an effort to not ever laugh at your jokes and make it a bit. And then I forgot to do that. And you made some jokes that were solid and I laughed at them. So I ruined my own bit.
Well, don't get used to it.
We'll just go straight into the episode today. Well, sort of. Today's episode's going to be a little different. You're either going to love it or you're going to hate it, but it will be uniquely us. Today we'll be covering Bretonnia. The last codex that they had was 6th edition, but Fantasy Battles ended on 8th edition, which is just oof. Also, Fantasy Battles is considered old world stuff, but game-wise, Old World the game is actually set prior to Fantasy Battles, which is what we colloquially consider Old World. You confused, Corgi?
Always.
Don't worry, it's about to get worse.
Well, yeah, I mean, I hear the name Bretonnia, and I'm like, oh, so it's English, it's, Britain. But no, it's the French.
Well, you want to know why?
Because the French and England are pretty much the same thing.
You've accidentally stumbled into what the entire first half of this episode is, which is me explaining why Bretonnia is the French.
Yeah. Stumbling my way through life is my motto.
So, this, why Bretonnia is French might be very confusing if you don't know much about English history, which I assume...
Which I don't.
You won't, yeah. And I would imagine 50% of our audience is American. And I would imagine their knowledge of French history and English history is pretty abysmal.
Yeah, they stopped caring after they threw the fucking tea in the harbour, and then it was just like, you know what, fuck it, we're gonna be children on our own, man.
Yeah, Americans erased the French from the Revolutionary War. That war was won by General Lafayette, who was a Frenchman, who showed up to help. They were losing the war until Lafayette showed up and the French military showed up. The French won the war, and then America went, hey, we did it. It was all us. We'll name a couple of things after Lafayette, and then we'll promptly erase them from history. Bretonnia is heavily based on Arthurian myth, but something you might notice in Arthurian myth is everyone is French. Lancelot du Lac is French, Morgan Le Fay is French, Excalibur...
Love her. Oh, I love Morgana Le Fay.
Well, Morgan Le Fay. Morgana is Welsh. Morgan Le Fay is French. Excalibur is French, and...
Excalibur.
Yeah, probably. It's probably something like that. The original name for Arthur's sword is... it's the Welsh word to cleave, so it's Califu, which...
It's what?
Califu.
Oh, I thought you said Cubfu, and I'm like, that's a fucking Pokemon, dude.
There's an F and a Y and a W and a CH in there. You've seen it. My ship in Sea of Thieves is called the Califu.
Yeah, and all I really remember about Sea of Thieves is you being like, hey, we're gonna go fight this ghost ship. Oh, hey, there's a Kraken. Hey, do you mind not having a panic attack while we're trying to fight this? And I'm just sobbing in the corner, rocking back and forth.
Just don't be shit.
Fuck you. We should play that later.
I thought we had to play Deep Rock Galactic and get the tentacle helmet.
Okay, we should play that later. I'm not even gonna lie. At first I was like, we should do some vocal warm-ups by playing Deep Rock Galactic. And then I was like, nah, Che's too busy brimming with knowledge. You'd just slip some of it out if we did.
This was supposed to be a backup episode that I can record on my own if you don't make it. But I wanted to talk about this so much that I just made it this week's episode. We were supposed to be talking about a completely different thing, which will be next fantasy episode, so in 2 weeks. So, but back on topic. Names such as Merlin and Guinevere are French versions of Brythonic names. And
Bretonnic?
yeah, Brythonic. That's the language.
Like Chthonic, but bruh.
Yeah, Brythonic. That's the language. That's what Breton, Welsh, and Cornish,
Oh, right, the Bretons.
their languages. It's a Brythonic language. It's a Celtic Brythonic language, not to be confused with Celtic Gaelic language, which is what Scottish language, not Scots, that's a different thing, and Ulster Scots, I think, and Irish. Those are Celtic Gaelic.
I was barely paying attention when you said that because I was like, okay, Scottish, Gaelic, I recognise some of these. What are the other things?
Yeah, so Scottish Gaelic is just called Gaelic, and Irish Gaelic is called Irish, but it is a Gaelic language. We'll get into why this is a bit confusing. So, a lot of Arthurian myth and the history of Arthurian myth is very complicated, as is the history of England and France. But a very real simplification is King Arthur fought at the Battle of Baden Hill, which is generally agreed to have happened, but whether Arthur was there or even existed in the first place is a whole other thing.
No. Of course he existed. Otherwise, mate, how would we have round tables? That shit wouldn't have existed without fucking King Arthur.
Quite famously invented round tables.
Well, obviously, he wanted to look all of his allies in the eye.
That's why Ragnar Lothbrok famously invented hairy pants. That's why he's got the name. If you didn't know, Lothbrok is Norse for hairy breeches, because he had had hairy pants. But there are...
Imagine that being your inheritance.
Yeah.
Hairy pants.
There are... Also, maybe Ragnar Lothbrok didn't even exist. But there are historical candidates for who mythical Arthur was based on. But whether he was based on one person or a mix, or it's just a complete fabrication, is up in the air.
Sounds about right.
Cast your mind back to the year 500 CE. You remember it?
I remember explicitly being in the nutsack of my great, I'm not even going to bother, grandfather's ballsack.
Well, that's good.
That's all I remember.
You passed the vampire test. I don't have to cancel this podcast early and go find a steak.
Stupid.
It was a really stupid joke, and you ruined. So sometimes I write jokes for this, and I write the setup and the punchline because I know you so well. I know what you're going to say. So, and then sometimes you don't say what I need you to say for the punchline to work, and you ruin the whole bit.
Well, then clearly you don't fucking know me that well.
Like 80% of the times I write a joke, you say what I need you to say for the joke to continue on. And the other 20%, you say something bafflingly stupid.
Yeah,
like
that's my whole thing.
Like all you needed to say was no. And instead you're like, I was in a ball sack.
Yeah, well, you're fucking welcome. You're the idiot who was like, yeah, let's take this idiot who can barely rub a brain cell together and do a podcast with her.
That's what makes the best podcasts. Someone...
The idiot and the tired one.
Someone who knows too much about things that they really aren't important. And someone who's a fucking moron.
You know, I am going to take offense to that. I just need to schedule it. By which I mean I'll forget it in the future and pretty much immediately forget it as soon as I'm done talking. Oh, me too.
The Battle of Baden Hill happened at around 500 CE and is recorded history from within 100 years of the event.
Mm-hmm.
So usually when you look into history, like if they say a battle happened and the first time it's ever recorded is like 400 years, it might not have ever happened. If the first time it's ever recorded is within 100 years, you got a good bet that it probably happened. It was probably a real battle that really happened because some of the people that were there or their direct descendants, like their kids, are still alive. So, Battle of Baden Hill almost certainly happened.
Arthur?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Arthur is first mentioned 300 years after the battle happened. So 200 years after the Battle of Baden Hill is recorded, Arthur is mentioned. Which puts a big on whether he existed. The Battle of Baden Hill was a British battle against the Anglo-Saxon invasion that halted it for a bit. And one of the things that the Anglo-Saxon invasion did was push out the indigenous population, who are the Bretons.
Of course.
The Bretons then fled into France, into the Western Peninsula, now called Brittany, after
Oh, right, yeah.
after themselves. It's also where the name Brittany comes from.
Yeah, that's the only thing I know about that.
And with that, they bring their Bretonnic culture, their language, and their history. We'll put a pin in the Britons.
I wouldn't do that if I were you. They're very spiteful people.
Meanwhile, the Anglo-Saxons conquer England and split it into several kingdoms. However, the Welsh and the Cornish, to a degree, managed to stay relatively independent and keep their Bretonnic history alive. Now, fast forward to 1066,
Jesus.
about 500 years later.
Am I supposed to be writing these dates down?
Not really, but there's a lot of dates in this whole episode, including in when we get to Bretonnia. So, fast forward to 1066, where Duke William the Bastard de Normandy, a French Duke, defeated Harold Godwinson, an Anglo-Saxon and the last Viking king, in the Battle of Hastings, which, as an aside, just randomly ended because Harold got shot in the eye and killed. They have a tapestry of the Battle of Hastings, and there's just a guy with an arrow in his eye, and then the text above it just says, Harold is killed. It's great.
Hold on. I think I might have actually seen that tapestry.
You probably would have seen it at any English history class. It comes up a lot.
Oh my gosh, yeah, where it's just like, well, this is...
The Battle of Hastings is the founding of modern English history, so everyone gets taught the Battle of Hastings in Australia. We miss out on an awful lot of English history, but the Battle of Hastings comes up. I have been taught the Battle of Hastings in several different years. Whenever you get into English history, it's, yeah, and then William the Conqueror won the Battle of Hastings.
Just because one dickhead got shot in the eye?
Yeah, because they were having a fight, and whether Harold was winning or William was winning, there's no real... Different sources say different things. But then it just randomly ends, because Harold gets shot, and his entire army just goes, well, and quits.
Not our problem.
So this the conquest of England by Duke William the Bastard de Normandy starts the melding of the culture between the French, and Anglo-Saxon culture.
So the bastard made the French...
Asterisk. I will not explain that asterisk. If that's one of the things where if you know, you know, I'm not explaining the asterisk, because otherwise we will be here for so much longer.
I just have a big note. Made the French, asterisk.
So, fast forward 50 or so years to 1136, 70 years, where a Welsh cleric, and I do not expect you to write down this name, writes a book called Historia Regnum Britanniae, or The History of the Kings of Britain. And
I'm just doing Welsh dude wrote a book.
Yeah. And that becomes the foundation for Arthurian myth, his family, Merlin, his eventual death at the hands of Mordred. None of this really existed in written word prior to this book.
So this dude just wrote fan fiction to make his family seem super important.
As I said, Arthur is referenced in around 800. So he's entered the general cultural knowledge and story, but it's just there was a guy called Arthur and he headed the army at the Battle of Baden Hill. There's not really much information on him, everything he did, his life, any of that. It's not until the History of the Kings of Britain where all of a sudden a lot of that is explored. And, you know, this is who he was. This is who he was married to. This is where he was from. this is how he died.
Fan fiction about a real person.
I think it was in the 1800s people started to realize this is literally fan fiction. It was considered historical text until around the 1800s, where people started adding, like, going, no, this doesn't add up. This doesn't make sense. It also was like, this guy is descended from this guy who is descended from David, like the King David from the Bible, who is descended from this guy, who is descended from this guy, who is descended from, or other way around, rather. His ancestors are, no, I got that right. Descended from this guy, descended from this guy, to descended from the king of Troy, from the Iliad, Achilles and stuff.
Fucking God.
And during that, some Trojans rocked up in England and their descendancy. But that's the same foundational myth as Rome. Rome takes Aeneas, took the sword of Troy, and his indeterminate amount of grandchildren became Romulus and Remus. Their foundation myth is built on the myth of Troy. As is Britons. They are also claim descendancy from Troy. It's just, historical people's attempts to validate their history of, well, I have a divine right to rule because I'm descended from Troy. And,
And they didn't have fucking DNA tests back then.
The Romans claimed to be descended from Troy, and that's what validated them. But we're also descended from Troy, so we're just as valid as the Romans. And the Romans are descended from King David himself. And King David himself is descended from Adam and Eve. So we are descended from God himself. I was watching one of those Find Your Ancestry things, and they brought up a book that was... Oh, not a book, but like this guy ended up being descended from a king of England, and they had his family tree that he officially paid for. And the first person on the tree was God. And then it was God created Adam, and then there were several lines, and then there was King David, and then there were several lines, and then there was Jesus, and then there were several lines. And obviously, he wasn't a direct descendant of Jesus because that's heresy. But it was, oh yeah, your great cousin was Jesus.
I'm already losing my mind.
Remember how I said this is just gonna get more confusing?
Oh, God.
This is what I meant. So,
buckle the fuck up.
This book, right, the history of the kings of Britain, becomes popular in England, specifically with the aristocracy, which, as I've said, are French, asterisk, which leads to its popularity in France, which leads to the expansion of Arthurian myth by French poets, specifically Christian de Troyes, which leads to the introduction of people like Lancelot du Lac and the Holy Grail to the story. And by that, I mean the entire concept of the Holy Grail. It didn't exist prior to its introduction into Arthurian myth. It's specifically an Arthurian thing. So, what's that film?
I just...
Indiana Jones. Jesus, I forgot fucking Indiana Jones. What's that film? Fucking Indiana Jones. That film wouldn't exist if King Arthur didn't exist. Or, King Arthur myth didn't exist.
Alright, in my notes, King Arthur made fucking Indiana Jones.
Yeah. King Arthur is directly responsible for Indiana Jones.
I just imagine the Welsh dude, like, sitting at his desk, like, oh, what can I do to make this story so good? And he just looks over at his goblet of wine and he's like...
Well, that wasn't the Welsh dude. That was a French dude. That was a French dude a couple hundred years later.
In other words, the Welsh and the French are both just casually writing fanfiction.
Yeah, basically. A lot of it became popular within French nobility, and they started writing all these poems about it. And Christian de Troyes is where a lot of it comes from, but there were others there who also added stuff to it. But I also just love the idea.
Bro, add me in. I want to be in the book.
I love the idea of, you got a butterfly flaps its wings and a hurricane forms on the other side of the world. It's a Frenchman in the 1300s writes a poem about a goblet, and Indiana Jones gets made 1,000 years later.
I love my goblet poem that makes international fucking family classic Indiana Jones.
Fucking mess. But this is also where we go back to our pin,
Oh, please stop pinning the English. They might get into it.
which by this point, Brittany is no longer an independent kingdom, but a duchy of France, and their myth and culture starts to re-enter, such as writers using Celtic names that weren't in the original story.
Hence Morgana instead of Morgan.
Yeah, I think Morgana might have existed prior, but I don't quite remember. But there's also the Brocéliande forest, which is a real forest in Brittany, though the real forest is also called the Pampan forest, but it is also called Brocéliande. And in the Pampan forest, it contains Val Saint-Retour, which is a place from the story, the point of no return, and the Tomb de Merlin, which is a Neolithic structure, and the alleged tomb of Merlin, if the name didn't give it away.
Neolithic.
But people in the Middle Ages also didn't really have the same understanding of technological progression. So that's why you get these depictions of men riding from their massive stone castles, where in reality, historical Arthur, if he existed, would have had a wooden hill fort, or maybe like a small stone fort if he was a Roman, because they think he also might have been a Roman.
Well, I mean, it would kind of make sense with a Troy thing.
There's a decent enough film called King Arthur, came out in 2004, that depicts the Battle of Baden Hill as though Arthur was a Roman and the Knights of the Round Table were other Roman centurions that fought alongside him. But that sort of giant stone castle, is the visual image that we see in Bretons, or Bretonnians. I was also talking to my wife the other day about how I wished I lived in the woods, and I've been watching a lot of environmental videos and looking up Pampan and just European woods in general, and they're just like really beautiful and awesome to live next to. But we don't have woods in Australia. We have bush, and the bush is full of snakes. I don't want to live in the bush.
The snakes are the least of your problems.
The bush sucks. I've been to the bush. It's hot, and it's full of snakes and spiders.
I can't even fault you. I live in the country, and well, I haven't seen a snake in years. But either way, it's fucking no. I'm not going out there. Not when kangaroos exist.
Fucking kangaroos. Jesus, kangaroos.
They're not cute. They're not cuddly. They're just steroid freaks.
Massive claws. I was patting a kangaroo the other day, but that was also at a zoo where they're used to people and not, trying to kill them all the time.
That we know of.
So, here's a story about snakes. So, I live in a city which is one of the largest cities in Australia with a population of several millions. And at the time, I lived in the inner city, like 10 minutes drive from the heart of the city. And I was walking home, having just been broken up with, and was just like really upset and angry. And just in the middle of the sidewalk in an inner city suburb was like a 3-meter snake. And it was nighttime. So I couldn't tell if it was a carpet python or an actual like dangerous snake. I'll tell you, nothing calms rage better than having to figure out if you are currently in danger of being killed by a wild animal. Like, was this going to turn around and bite me? And then it's like, oh, this is a problem. Or is this just going to avoid me because it's a carpet python?
Just the fact that you got broken up with by a snake, and then a new snake comes slithering by, and it's like, oh, great.
I like you saying, broken up by a snake, because you obviously don't know the full context of that story, because that is my current wife. We broke up at one point.
No, I love her. I don't want her to think I'm calling her a snake.
I'll let her know that you call her that.
No!
You won't be invited to stay with us again.
You can't stop me. I know where you live.
But it's just like when you go from the human, my feelings hurt, to a brain, I am currently unsafe.
Just that is the moment where you stop being human and you start being monkey, and your monkey self is like,
About to find a big
Rifle
stick
run.
and just start smacking Snake.
that's how I lost my first boyfriend.
Jesus Christ.
Would you turn out that? Just like pulls down his trousers and my dumb brain is like, Snake! Just starts smacking his dick.
Anyway, part of the reason I wanted to cover Bretonnia was because I just wanted to talk about this specifically. The history of France and Arthurian myth. Because I find it fascinating. And just the shared history. And that the English and French hate each other. And in a sense, the English are French and the French are English. And both of them are Danes and all of them are German.
Moral of the story is, don't worry everyone. Yes, this still is Warhammer.
Yeah, we are 45 minutes into the recording currently. But we haven't even started talking about Warhammer.
Oh my god.
But
let us know if you want us to do a historical podcast next. God.
that long little history lesson is all to give you the historical reason why all the Bretonnians, the people based off the English and Arthurian myth, are French, and why GW made the decisions that it made.
I'm starting a new section called Space France.
Space France.
With an Space France with an asterisk.
This is fantasy.
Yes, and I'm saying that, Space France. Because
Why are they Space France?
I don't fucking know.
Why are they in space? Who put the French in space?
I'm talking about fucking Warhammer, like the Bretonnians.
Yeah, but we're covering Warhammer fantasy. They're not in space. Why are the French in space? Take the French out of space. Put them back on land. There's not enough cheese in space.
Don't worry, they can raid the fucking Americas. What if that did happen? If just one day France was like, wait a second, those fuckers are hoarding cheese. I have an idea. And we just get like a French heist movie.
I think the French have enough cheese.
Well, clearly so does America, but they don't seem to get enough of it.
Yeah, but that cheese is shit.
What cheese do they
American cheese.
Wait, is American cheese like plastic
Yes.
cheese?
Yes.
Once you get...
The orange cheese. Yes.
The kind that literally looks like it was spray painted.
Yeah, and the cans of cheese. You can get the spray cans of cheese.
No.
You never seen the spray cans of cheese?
No, I blocked it out of my memory, and now I'm just remembering. Like, I don't know what clip it was from. Maybe like a Casper movie, where it's like just huge fucking of it.
So now we actually start the Warhammer section of the podcast.
Yes, Space France, except I would cross that
Yeah,
out.
the Space France, but they're not in space. They're in France.
I'm adding an asterisk. Space asterisk. France asterisk.
So the land that would become Bretonnia was occupied by elves.
Oh my god, yeah, no. Time out. My brain is still thinking of France, so I'm like, okay, elves.
Regular France is currently occupied by elves.
That explains why they're so high and mighty.
It's probably all the wars that they won. It's probably all the wars that they won and the credit that they are refused. I too would be kind of pissed off if the general consensus was cheese-eating surrender monkeys and you have the most successful military in the entire world, or one of. I think they've won 80% of the wars that they've gone in.
Yeah, we sort of always forget that. Like, fucking Napoleon was
Yeah.
a thing. Yet we're still just like, haha, he's tiny, he's short. But it wasn't actually short.
France has consistently been one of the best militaries in the world. Even during World War II, even though France capitulated pretty quickly due to the poor design decisions of stocking their entire military on the Maginot Line and weren't expecting the Germans to just go around it, the Free French, which was all of France that wasn't France itself, fought till the end of the war. The French military, once France was, what's the word? Freed.
Emancipated?
Yeah, emancipated from the Germans, immediately went back into the military. They immediately started fighting. And not to consider all of the French resistance the entire time that they were occupied. The French civilians just went, what if we just started killing Germans? And continued to fight until the Americans and British stormed Normandy.
So that, Jesus Christ.
I too would be pissed if I was denied all of the credit. just how much, like, France carried history. And then everyone goes, oh, you're a bunch of fucking cheese-eating surrender losers. Yeah, that'd annoy me. That's not going to stop me from naming this episode Cheese-Eating Surrender Monkey. That is absolutely what it will be called.
I love that. That's the whole reason you wanted to do this episode.
No, the whole reason I wanted to do the episode was to talk about Arthur. But, so the land that would become Bretonnia, I have to edit this, was occupied by elves who built massive cities and flourishing harbors. All very pretentiously, as elves tend to do. They also traded with the dwarves, and everything was happy. Then a war broke out between the two, called the War of the Beard, or the War of Vengeance, or the War against the Elves.
Jesus Christ, it's like the Covenant.
The
Age of Redemption, the Age of Retribution.
This started because Malekith, remember when we mentioned Malekith is a god in Age of Sigmar?
Ah, yeah, the one that was put into Thor too.
Yeah. He sent dark elves, dressed as high elves, to attack the dwarves. The dwarves, led by King Gotrek Starbreaker, demanded compensation from Phoenix King Calidor II.
That dude was probably like, what are you talking about? We never attacked you. Oh wait, no, they're prideful lot. They're sort of I will not.
He was an absolute about it. He's 100% the reason that the war started. I was reading was just like, yeah, he wasn't as good as his dad, and he fucked everything up. So Calidor refused and insulted the dwarves, being like, oh, what a bunch of little baby woozers. You guys gonna beg for some money? Wah. So the dwarves then went, all right, pay us double, dickheads.
Well, yeah, you don't fuck with dwarves.
And then Calidor, being a fucking moron, shaved the beards of the dwarf ambassador and his guards.
Oh my god.
That went in the fucking book.
Well, yeah.
You don't know about the book, do you? The book. The book of Grudges.
Oh,
it's going in the book.
Oh god, the original burn book.
So the Book of Grudges is a book that the dwarves have that holds every single grudge that the dwarves have ever had, every single slight that has not been repaid, and it is written in the blood of dwarf kings, and only the kings have the right to strike an entry from the book, forgiving the grudge when it has been rightfully repaid.
I just imagine that on the front there's like a little insignia of a middle finger.
I think it's a fist.
That's boring. I'm doing the middle finger.
This went in the book, and then war were declared. Remember how I started hitting you with years?
Yes.
We're about to get into some more years.
Oh, crit. I'm not writing them down.
So this war, these ones are more important than the other ones.
Damn it. Alright.
So this war happened at around 2000 IC, which is Imperial calendar. 1 IC is when Sigmar is coronated as king.
So 1000?
2000. So this is 2000 years before Sigmar became king.
2000 IC.
This is also not exact. I'm rounding up these numbers. Unless I remember this one was 1997 IC. Unless you want to specifically write every single one of these down. But I don't remember the others, so here we are.
I'll just do it around 2000 IC.
So Gotrek then killed Calidor II in 1500 IC.
So before the war started?
No, because it's minus. It's minus 1500 IC. I should have specified that.
Okay, so it counts backwards and stuff.
Yes. So this is the BCE. So minus 2000 IC, and then minus 1,500 IC, which means that war went for 500 years.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And during that war, the dwarves destroyed most of the elven colonies, and this was the elves' colonies on the old world. They live in the middle of the ocean, it's a thing. And just destroyed all of them and sent them from the old world. So the elves, the high elves, that being, no longer have any presence in the old world.
They got a victory.
Yeah, just a solid victory for that 500-year war. Just absolutely crushed your enemy. So much so that they never came back.
They got full on banished to the Shadow Realms. They fucked up that bad.
Yeah. They got fucked off into their little Atlantis-y place, Ulthway. No, not Ulthway. Ulthian. Ulthway's a Eldar thing. The dwarves were very seriously weakened by this. And they didn't really have much of an interest in colonizing what the elves left. So they just abandoned all of what would become Bretonnia. And the land was slowly overtaken by orcs and human tribes, with the Bretonny arriving around minus 1,000 IC.
1,000.
Yeah. Now, 300 years later, the land is mostly ruled by 20 tribes of Bretonny. So, despite all the raiding from the orcs, the Norska, who are Chaos Vikings from totally not Scandinavia in the north, and Tomb Kings, zombie Egyptians from
Love that.
Nehekara, something like that, to the south.
The Soon type.
The bros just wanted to farm, which is a vibe. If my wife and I didn't require living in the city for our jobs, we would just move further out and have a nice little farm.
With blackjack and hookers. Sorry.
But
I'm not sorry.
this led to the creation of a professional warrior class that would train as knights and be ready to fight any threat. The regular folks would provide the best equipment and food to the knights, and their small towers gradually became stone castles with villages around it to provide supplies to the knights. You know that feeling when all you want to do is farm so much, you accidentally invent feudalism?
Welcome to our 4-hour essay on Stardew Valley. Or Medieval Dynasty, whichever
Or
one's more
Medieval
appropriate.
Dynasty. Stardew Valley isn't a feudalist society.
Not yet.
I'm sure there's a mod somewhere.
Next DLC.
So, fast forward to around 930 IC.
Is that negative? Or is that
Positive. So this is about 1,000 years later.
Hell yeah. 930 IC.
Things start to get rough, where a whole tribe gets wiped out by the orcs, and 15 years later, more orcs overrun lands, as well as increase in the raids from Norska, as well as beastmen start rocking up.
Like, what sort of beastmen?
Beastmen. They're just called the beastmen. They're like beastmen.
Oh, so it's not like, like how in, let's say D&D, it's like you classify them as a lump sum, like the lizard folk and the Aarakocra.
Yeah, they are
Just
sort of like a lump sum. Like they're chaos-y things, but like, there's satyrs, there's minotaurs, there's centaurs, there's mean centaurs, there's manticores. They're just beastmen.
Nice.
The beastmen also technically exist in 40k, but they're complicated.
God, I need to get that in my head, that Warhammer and 40k
Yes,
are different.
you really do. Also, it's Warhammer 40k and Warhammer Fantasy. They're both Warhammer.
Fantasy, Warhammer.
Stop thinking just think Fantasy and 40k, not Warhammer. Forget the Warhammer part. All of this podcast is Warhammer. But we are doing Fantasy, and then there are two fantasies. There's Old World and Age of Sigmar. This is Old World. Then there's 40k. And technically, there's two Warhammer futures. There's Horus Heresy as a playable game, and then there's 40k. Horus Heresy is set in 30k. And Horus Heresy comes up a lot in 40k, because a lot of what happened in Horus Heresy is why things are so bad in 40k.
I'm doing, Brent.
the Norska have increased raids, and the Beastmen have started rocking up.
Ah, nice. And the Norse car, they were the not Vikings, but Vikings.
They're chaos worshipping Vikings.
Oh, Chaos Vikings.
That's literally what I called them. I literally called them Chaos Vikings from totally not Scandinavia.
Okay, in my defense, I am a little hungry right now, so my brain is running on slow brain.
The Norska have increased raids, and Beastmen have started rocking up. So things are going bad in the north. 3 years later, Rosalind of Bastion marries Tierolf of Leonis, and Tierolf becomes best mates with her brother Gilles. Which, as an aside, the YouTube channel Julien Miquel carried the pronunciations of this episode. Fucking French, man. You can't write a fucking word and then not pronounce half the fucking letters. It's fucking bullshit. Fucking hate this language.
Yeah, you say Gilles. You say Gilles, and I just imagine
Yeah,
Gilles.
it's spelled Giles,
Fancy.
but it's pronounced Gilles.
Ah, Gilles.
Yeah. Yeah, if I put it more twatty, it's Gilles. Oh, Gilles.
Yeah, and then at the same time, you sound like you're going into Mandarin there.
Yeah.
Sure. God. My heart goes out to anyone who knows how to fluently speak that.
Researching just the names of this episode is just that video of Kevin Rudd, former Prime Minister of Australia, trying to speak Chinese and just going, this fucking language.
This fucking language.
That was me the entire time, was just going, this fucking language. Stupid.
When did he do that?
While he was Prime Minister. Someone linked the video of him. He was doing a speech in Chinese, and it was him practicing the speech, and he kept fucking up one specific sentence, and he just goes, this fucking language, and it went everywhere, and it wasn't like other Prime Minister Tony Abbott going, ah, shit happens, where it became this massive controversy. Everyone was just like, that's a valid response. Just Prime Minister going, trying and failing at speaking a language he is fluent in. Kevin Rudd is fluent in Mandarin Chinese, and he still just goes, this fucking language.
Anyway, 930 IC.
So 2 years after this, Gilles set out and killed a fucking dragon that they stupidly called Smeargus. Yes, Smeargus. There's a H in Gus. But yeah, Smeargus. It's a fucking shit name.
Well, yeah, it sounds way too close to smegma.
It's like they started with Smaug, and they were like, how can we make Smaug better? And then they went with Smeargus, and it wasn't better, it was worse. But this led to Gilles becoming renowned throughout the lands of Bretonny. He became world famous as the guy who killed a dragon, and his house banner became a dragon. They put a dragon on it because he's the guy who killed a dragon with a dumb fucking name.
The old Welsh treatment.
Yeah, pretty much. That's probably where they took it from. I didn't put that together, but yeah, they probably took it from St. George.
Wait, are you saying I had a coherent
Yeah, you
thought?
outsmarted me for once in the 7 years I've known you. 6?
7 years, really?
When did Apex Legends come out? So, 22 years later, in 974,
974.
the orcs attack with the largest horde they've ever attacked in the land. They probably had a war going on. I'm not going to explain what a war is to you yet, Corgi, because that's its own thing.
Is it WHAR?
No, WAGH. Wah.
I'm not. Yeah, no.
You gotta give it the wah! My wife probably just heard that one. What the fuck was that? Anyway. Another tribe gets wiped out by the Orc War. And things are looking pretty bad. I've already said things are going pretty bad. Things are looking pretty bad. But things are looking much worse. Especially if it's an Orc War. Orc Wars aren't really things that you come out of good. The following year, the Orcs attacked Baston, but are successfully repelled. However, the lord is killed, and ascending into lordship is our good friend Gilles. Gilles then amassed a cavalry warband with Thierolf and Lord Landuin of Mussillon. Mussillon?
Musillon.
Yeah, Mussillon.
Yeah, I think you're right the first time.
And then spends a year fighting the orcs to no real avail. Then, after one battle, which doesn't really detail too much, but by the sounds of it, went pretty tits up. It didn't sound like they came out of it good. The remnants of his army camped in the forest of Chalon, surrounded and preparing for their final battle. Then, the following morning, the knights went to drink from the lake. However, the mist of the lake transformed into the visage of a woman.
Oh, the lady in the lake?
The lady in the
Seriously?
lake pops up a lot. So,
What if she's just like, can you please stop fucking drinking my house, dude? That's really fucking rude.
so she was holding a grail and asked all of the knights to drink from it.
Drink my pea water, man. Do it. It'd be fun.
Yeah, literally drink my elf god bath water. Because the lady is an elf god. It doesn't explain that at all in any of the sources I was reading, but then I just went to look for a bit more information about her, and she's apparently just an elf god.
Elf goddess of
Yeah,
the lake.
she's an elf god who favors humans more than elves, because she's just really took a liking to Bretonnia. The knights then drunk from the grail, and Gilles dipped his banner into the lake and asked the lady to bless it, transforming his banner from the dragon to the visage of the lady. Gilles
How egotistical.
Gilles and his newly anointed Grail Knights rode into what they presumed to be their final battle and slaughtered the orcs. It also said that when they slept, they just had a restful sleep. They woke up in the morning completely recovered, full of energy. A lot of their injuries were healed overnight. It went they were ordained by a god, basically. They were blessed by a god. They were also then granted magical weapons from the Wood Elves of Andorran, which is a forest in Bretonnian land. So he got blessed by a bunch of random ass Wood Elves.
Why is this dude so main character?
This is basically what the rest of the Bretonnian episode was. I was going to get into more detail about them, and then as I was researching it, it was just here's the foundation of this country, and it's all about Gilles. So it's all about Gilles.
Everybody loves Gilles.
So over the next 2 years, Gilles, now titled the Lord of Battles, rode throughout the land, battling back enemies, freeing their lands, winning every battle they fought, and in 979, the lands of Bretonny are freed from the invading armies, and the lands are unified into the 14 dukedoms, and the nation of Bretonnia is created, with each duke being one of the 14 Grail Knights, Gilles included. So the two other notable Grail Knights are Thierolf, who I don't remember. There was something special about him, other than him just being his friend. I think he was maybe the most honourable knight or something like that. And
I was so hoping you were going to say he was his lover.
Lord Landuin is regarded as the greatest knight who ever lived. He was the most competent warrior in all the lands. He was the knight's knight, right? He was the knight that every knight aspires to be.
He was the role model.
So the 14 duchies that are unified are Coronet, L'Anguille, these pronunciations are going to be fucked, Leonis, Artois, Gisarou, Mussillon, Bordelou, Bastion. Yeah,
Waterloo? Oh, Bordelou. I thought you said Waterloo, like the Battle of Waterloo.
Bastion, Montfort, Aquitaine, Brionnais, Quenelles, Paravon, and Carcassonne. No, Carcassonne.
Carcassonne?
So, Aquitaine and Artois
Hang on.
are real places
Carcassonne, that's a king.
in real world France.
Oh my god.
It's like if in Lord of the Rings, they amassed an army and they're like, this is the combined forces of Gondor, Rohan, and Wales.
I'd be terrified if someone called Wales was charging at me.
Two of them, Quinellis and Corone, are food.
Mm-hmm.
They're just...
What about Carcassonne?
Carcassonne is a real place, but it is a real city rather than a real region, as is... there was another one in there, Montfort. Montfort is a real castle, but they're not... Artois and Aquitaine are real regions.
Carcassonne is also a game. I think it's a board game.
It's probably named after the... Because it's a medieval themed, it's probably named after the place. But Artois and Aquitaine are like what is essentially like a state.
Hell yeah. A state of referencing.
Though I think... so Aquitaine is no longer a state. The region doesn't exist anymore, but it was dissolved... Let me do some math. I'm bad at math. 8 years ago.
You're telling me?
So it was a state up until 8 years ago, and now it just is currently administrated by Nouvelle Aquitaine.
Hell yeah.
Which is...
I don't understand what that is.
It's basically like they merged two states together and just called it the name of two states. It's like if Victoria and New South Wales got merged together to be one state, and they're like, it's no longer two states. It's now Victoria and New South Wales, and that's the name of the state. A regular Albury Wodonga. That is such a specific reference.
It really is. Whatever.
I knew a guy from Albury. For context, Albury Wodonga are two different cities that exist on the border of Victoria and New South Wales, and they are so uniquely connected that you never just say Albury or Wodonga, you say Albury Wodonga. They're two different places. They're just across the river from each other in two different states. That's fair. There's a border town in Queensland called Texas. Just Texas. There's a place in America, Texas, called Pie Town. Anyway.
I think we're getting a bit off topic there.
So somewhere during the next 17 years, Gilles duels Aborash, who is one of the first vampires and the creator of the Blood Knights. And seemingly a pretty decent dude. He didn't feel good about the whole murdering innocents, and when he finally slaughtered 10 people to feast on, he then went on a self-imposed exile. The first vampire, I don't remember her name. She's Nefertiti or something like that, but it's not Nefertiti, but it's very close. She's a Tomb King. She kept offering to make him a vampire, and he kept being like, I don't want to be a vampire. And she kept being like, oh, have this drink. And it's like, is it blood? And she's like, you got me, it's blood. She kept trying to turn him into a vampire, and he managed to avoid it for about 10 years before it didn't exactly say whether he was consensually turned into a vampire or she was like, have this drink. And then he drank it, and he went, I forgot to ask if it was blood. And she went, you did. It's blood.
Welcome to the family, son.
But their duel ended with him swearing an oath and life debt to Gilles. And he also built a church.
Jesus. A religious vampire?
Basically. And he showed up during End Times to fight alongside Gilles. So he shows up and fights alongside the humans. Bretonnia.
I'm just hearing vampire Merlin.
I wouldn't be surprised if that's
Did I ruin it?
I wouldn't be surprised if that's in part where his inspiration comes from. But there's also probably some other guys that are more Merlin-y.
Merlin, yeah.
So in 995, 17 years after the foundation of Bretonnia, Gilles is killed after one of the last Bretonnian orc warlords yeets a weapon at him during a challenge. It specifically says hurled weapon, not a spear, a javelin, like a bow or arrow. So I think he just challenged the orc to a fight, and the orc said sure and just lobbed an axe at him, and it just beamed him in the head. But it also says that this caused the knights to swear off ranged weaponry. They refused to use weapons that kill at a distance. Which also, they use trebuchets and peasant archers. So they're not adverse to other people doing it that they command. They themselves just don't use ranged weaponry. Because Gilles got murked by a random hurled weapon.
It wasn't even a ranged weapon, it just happened to be thrown.
Because as far as I'm aware, orcs don't really use spears or javelins. So it was probably just an axe. He probably just got an axe lobbed at him, and it just fucking killed him. It's like Richard the Lionheart, real king, got murked by some random peasant kid with a crossbow. Just went, oh, that's the king, and shot at him and killed him.
God, a lot of kids end up killing famous people. It's a bit weird.
So, as he died, he saw a vision of the Lady of the Lake, and his knights placed him on a ship by the mists on a nearby lake, or maybe the lake. The different sources that I was reading said different lakes. Some of them said it was the nearby lake, others said it was the lake where he first saw the lady.
Oh, she's not bringing him back,
And
is she?
then he sailed into the mists. Also, it was a ghost ship. I thought I wrote that in my notes,
Ghost ship.
but I didn't. They got there, and there was a ship made out of the mists, and they just put him on the ghost ship,
Fed
and
it.
then the ghost ship sailed off into the distance. And he
Don't tell me he comes back
sailed
alive.
into the mists to serve the lady. And the legends tell that he would return to Bretonnia in their most dire time of need. This is a lie.
Well, yeah, because he's
He
fucking
returns a lot more than the most dire times of need.
dead. Oh my god.
He shows up a lot. But all of this is just straight out of Arthurian myth. The lady, the Grail, the 12 battles against the orcs. Apparently Arthur had 12 battles against the Anglo-Saxons. I didn't know about that until I was reading about this. The body being sent to a lake, the once and future king who will return when the land is in danger, is all Arthurian. All of that is straight lifted from Arthurian myth. Gilles was succeeded by his son Louis, who... Yeah,
Gooey?
Louis.
Oh, Louis. I thought you said Gooey. And I was like, oh,
Gooey.
shitty name.
Gooey the Rash.
Gooey the Rash?
So Louis immediately set out to find the lady and gain her blessing, which then caused him to become known as Louis the Rash, because he ascended into his position and then immediately fucked off and disappeared. And 5 years later, he returned having completed many great deeds, earning the lady's blessing and returning with an ancient golden crown and a magical sword, and is crowned the first king of Bretonnia by the Fey Enchantress, and creates the decrees of chivalry.
So he fucked off for 18 years just to do shit.
5 years.
5
I don't know
years.
where you got the 18 from.
I don't know either.
Did a bunch of quests and came back having earned the favor of the Lady in the Lake. So I'll leave that here for the history of Bretonnia. There's a lot more that happens. There's simultaneously a lot and a little bit of information for Bretonnia. Like with 40k and Age of Sigmar, you'll read a bit of information and then look into it, and there are whole books where it gets mentioned a lot, and like it's covered in a lot of detail. And this was very much a thing that gets mentioned, and then it's the only time that it gets mentioned, and you can't really dig into it all that much, but there's just so much. Like, I was basing a lot of this off in the 6th edition codex, it has the history of Bretonnia. This was half of what it listed. But it's all, it then, starts, and then we, instead of in a year's time, in 3 years' time, in 5 years' time, in 17 years' time, in 5 years' time, it then goes in 200 years' time, in 300 years' time, in 500 years' time. And it's just like, there's one guy, he ruled for a bit, he was a bit of a dickhead, and then it moves on to the next guy who ruled in like 300 years' time. So there's a lot there, but a lot of it was just sort of like, it's not all that important. Where this is all the foundation of the nation and the foundation of what they become. The creation of the knights, their code of honor, the foundation of the religion, the cult of the lady, and that sort of thing. So there's definitely a lot more with Bretonnia coming into end times, and in general how its society functions, which we'll revisit someday. But for now, we'll just go over a few small little things, which is, when I mentioned Louis getting crowned, the Fey Enchantress.
Yeah, that's just Morgana.
Yes, but no. So the Fey Enchantress, she is the representative of the lady and the leader of her cult. Once again, that's cult in the traditional sense, which means a pantheon of gods and these people just worship one god. Cult being a negative connotation is only really a thing that started happening in like the 1960s. When you look historically and traditionally into the term cult, and it even pops up, in like polytheistic religions, like Hindu religions and stuff, like, the cult of Ganesh, where these people acknowledge and believe in the pantheon and all these other gods, but they only worship and do religious practices for this one specific god because that's their god. Usually how it functions is, I follow the cult of Demeter because Demeter I'm a farmer and she is the god of the or goddess of the harvest. I don't really need to worship anyone else but Demeter because she does the thing for me. Fishermen only worshipping the cult of Poseidon. So on and so forth. But no one really knows what her deal is with the Fey Enchantress, whether she is just one immortal being or multiple people, or is one being that is reincarnated every single time she dies. There are multiple different accounted Fey Enchantresses with different names, but they might just be the same person. She's magic. She might be able to change her appearance. She also just kidnaps children.
What? I was about to make a Doctor Who joke. What do you mean she kidnaps children?
She will enter a town and gather all the children there with a, quote, intense latent power. Like, the children have an intense latent power, not she does. And then she takes them to the other world, just glossed over the other world. I think the other world pops up in a bit in Arthurian mythology. I think it's where, like, the Fae and stuff come from.
Yeah.
I don't know this from reading, like, Arthurian myth. I know this from X-Men. There's a whole, like, Excalibur and Captain Britain, and Captain Britain gets his powers from... Excalibur is also, like, a force, not the weapon. But Captain Britain...
sort of like...
like X-Men, like, or the Avengers. There's Excalibur, who are mostly mutants, mostly British, mostly work in the other world with fairies and elves and shit. Not all of them are British, and the last Excalibur, like, 2 people on the team of, like, 6 were British. It was kind of weird. But Otherworld is like a place out of time and mortality, and she takes the kids there, and the girls will sometimes come back as damsels or prophets of the lady. Didn't say what damsels were. It was just as damsels. I guess there's the questing knights, and the knights they forgo their lands and become questing knights to set out on a quest and to achieve their quest, and then they become Grail Knights at the end of it. I assume damsels need to be saved by the questing knights to become Grail Knights.
What does she get out of it?
It's part of the religion. So they're just sort of like an aspect of the religion. Maybe they get a husband out of it. I don't fucking know. But the boys are never heard from again. They just disappear. Rip.
Oh, God.
This is just Morgan Le Fay. The Enchantress at the end times, so before the world ended, her name is Morgana Le Fay. So the last Enchantress is literally just Morgan Le Fay. So the Green Knight,
Ah, the Green Knight, the Druid one.
is a mysterious entity and the champion of the Lady of the Lake. And he appears in times of need, appearing out of a green mist. When his job is finished, he just disappears again.
Mists.
He is immortal, incapable of being hit, though can and has been killed and has been resurrected, and is sometimes the final quest of a questing knight, having to prove their honor against him to become a Grail Knight. They don't have to win, they just have to prove themselves worthy. And if they are unworthy, or they have selfish desires, they're just not fit to be a knight, he'll kill them.
Oh yeah, just like
There's
Muji.
no try again later. It's just, guess you'll die.
If you're nasty, you're nasty. But wait, hang on. So he can't be hit, but he can die.
It said that he can change his
That makes
form
no fucking sense.
so that he is incorporeal and cannot be hit. But then it's like, and when he dies, it gets resurrected. It's like, so he can be hit. So seemingly,
What is he? Is he Kitty Pryde?
I guess that's it. I guess like he might die. He can't die in battles, but he might die in a fight against the knights. So he might go into a battle against the questing knights, and they'll kill him, and he'll just come back alive. But in battle against enemies, he just can't die. I think it just depends on what he needs. This also confused me. You were confused. It confused me when I read it. I tried to look more into it. Doesn't explain it. So I just have to kind of guess.
So it's just a final boss.
But he is also Gilles. And this is what I mean by Gilles returns a lot more than just when Bretonnia is in its greatest peril. He has just shown up consistently throughout all of Bretonnia's history. Whenever there's a fight that's going wrong, Gilles shows up. The Bretonnians don't know he's Gilles. That's not something that they're aware of. They just think he's this weird knight dude that's powered by the lady.
Hey, don't you think it's kind of coincidental that this thing showed up only after our Lord Ushao died? It's kind of weird. Anyway, I wonder who he is.
There's probably nothing to this.
No, sorry, hold on. I just want to reiterate one more time. This is the fucking Warhammer universe, and we've got Vampire Merlin, we've got Fey Enchantress cult that steals children, probably eats the boys. You've got the Green Knight, which is a famous fucking, what is it, Irish Celtic
Arthurian myth
story?
Green Knight's an Arthurian myth.
Oh, fuck's sake.
There's an Arthurian character from the story of Gawain and the Green Knight.
Oh, that's right. All of this is in the same fucking universe as the Chaos Gods. As Haunt. Oh.
All of this is happening while the Skaven are around.
Now I'm just imagining, like, while it's all happening, you just have this, like, little Skavens watching, like...
Also,
this is weird.
This is all happening while there's Aztec lizard men, led by a literal mummy, while being attacked by Egyptian zombies.
That'll be it for this episode, everybody.
Like, they directly border the Egyptian zombies. They get into a lot of scuffles with the Egyptian zombies and the orcs. They get attacked by the orcs a lot. Who, once again, are based on football hooligans.
That'll be the end of this episode, everybody. I have lost...
It's not the end of this episode. We got a little bit more. There's not much, but...
Fuck.
So, it is also said that as the world ended during end times, that Gilles and Louis Leoncourt, who was the last king of Bretonnia, would ascend to godhood, which would be Age of Sigmar, and as far as I'm aware, they aren't gods in Age of Sigmar, which sucks. I think Bretonnia is really cool, and I think it would be awesome if they showed up in Age of Sigmar, coupled with the fact that Age of Sigmar's models are peak. They genuinely have the better models of the sci-fi versus fantasy. Age of Sigmar models are fucking amazing, every single one of them. And their models in Old World, because they brought back Old World and they gave them new models, they're just refreshed, remastered, quote-unquote, versions of old World models. So they don't really look great, but they're not as like bulky and shit as the original models from 2001. They're smoothed out and they look better, but they don't have that just like polish that the Age of Sigmar models have. So it would just be awesome to have those new models, and I think it would just, you know, the fucking Sigmar could kick into a new area in some yet discovered place, and then there's just, oh, Bretonnia's here, just run by the Lady of the Lake, who she dies. So then there's a new Lady of the Lake who's also an elven god. The new Lady of the Lake isn't an elven god. She's an elf who's immortal, obviously, but she ascends into godhood at Age of Sigmar. I'm pretty sure she is one of the named elf gods in Age of Sigmar. So there's the capacity to bring them back, and I want them back. I love their fucking models. I want a Green Knight model that's not so like the current model is not terrible. It's a decent enough model compared to everything else, but it's not great. It's just a bit wonky, and I would like a proper model.
And what I would like is for in the future, Warhammer to actually fucking make sense. Not because you're not explaining it well, but because my monkey brain just doesn't fathom half of these concepts.
So Bretonnia is very much just like the romanticized version of medieval history, with all these noble knights who follow this deep, unshakable code of honor, and peasants happily do their jobs because the knights protect them, and not because they're a slave class who doesn't have any choice or mobility in their position.
Don't worry about that part.
It's like, you know, when you're a kid and you hear about knights, and then Bretonnia is that, rather than when you're, 12, sitting in SOS class, and they're covering English history, and then just like every single one of these was a pack of fucking bastards. It's like, neat.
Don't meet your heroes, kids, no matter how gallant they are.
But yeah, you mentioned it earlier. There's the film Green Knight by David Lowery with Dev Patel as Gawain, which is based on Arthurian myth, and it's a bizarre film. It is weird. It is incredibly weird. It's one of the best films I've ever seen in my life. And it was one of those films where you watch it, at least for me, and you come out a different person. And that film fucked me up. And I'm just going to take the opportunity to be like, just go watch that film. It's you might hate it because it's weird. It is really weird, and it's one of the only films I've ever watched, because usually I understand subtext in films well enough, and I can understand themes, and like, a movie might be about one thing and I can tell what it's actually about. I didn't need people to tell me that Starship Troopers is about fascism. I got that watching the film. Green Knight was a film where I watched that and I went, I don't know what this film was about. It's about something. I don't know what it's about though. And then I had to read interviews with the director. I watched other people's analysis of it. I read articles detailing it. It's about a lot of things. It's about being like an outsider and trying to find your place in the world. It's about toxic masculinity, but not in the sort of like all masculinity is toxic, but in doing something so incredibly stupid to prove that you're a big man and fundamentally ruining your life. And the right thing is then to own that. As a man, you don't run and hide. You don't blame other people. You accept responsibility for what you've done. You accept responsibility that you fucked up and that you can't fix this. You just have to accept it. And
yeah, there's no running away from what you've done.
And it's about environmentalism. It's about, to a lesser extent, Christianity and Christian colonialism. It's about a lot of things. And it's an amazing film. As I said, it's one of those films you watch and I came out of it a different person. I was like, fuck. this film fucked me up. The final scene of this film fucked me up. Everything about this film fucked me up. It is just a masterpiece of film, and it is truly bizarre.
But
it's damn good, but I can also understand why someone would watch that film and just go, I hated this. I've never watched a film more that blew me away, that I understood 100% why someone would hate this film. But the general consensus seemed to be pretty positive from everyone. Even the people who didn't really get it, they were just like, look, it's good. It's really good. I didn't understand it, but it was good. And to be fair, I was one of those people. But I wanted to understand it more, so I actually made an effort to understand it more as a film. And this has been Che and Corgi Reviews a Movie podcast. If you take nothing else outside of this Warhammer episode, is go watch a movie. But yeah, that's it for the episode. just the final 10 minutes is just me gushing about a fucking movie.
And don't forget, the first hour of our recording
about 40 minutes. That
was
is
just
40 minutes, but yeah, it's French history.
Moral of the story is...
Yeah, the moral of the story is
Arthur?
French, the French, the English, and the Danish are all German. That's it. That's the moral of the story. And the Bretonnians, the French people, are based on the English, who are Danish. Except for the English who aren't. The English who are actually English. Which aren't the English who currently occupy England.
Not
the current English are colonists who colonized colonists, who colonized colonists, who colonized the indigenous people. English history is fucking bizarre. It's a lot of different ethnic groups just overthrowing other ethnic groups and then claiming to be the one true English, despite the fact that the one true English currently live in France.
I feel like I've just played the most complicated version of Go in my entire life.
I remember once I summed this up on a Reddit comment with someone where I just was like, the English hate each other. The English and the French hate each other. And it's a really simple history. It's not hard to understand. You see, the English got invaded by the French, and the English got invaded by the Romans, who then got invaded by the Anglo-Saxons. So then they became the French, and then the French then invaded the Anglo-Saxons, who became the English, and it was just the back and forth between those two countries, just swapping and then the French invaded the English, and then the English invaded the French, and then the French invaded the English, and then the French. It's
just a slap fight.
I appreciate Australian history, where it's just like some people rocked up somewhere between 90 to 70,000 years ago. We don't really know when. We thought it was 70,000 years ago. We've found fossils and stuff that stretch back 90,000 years ago. So, and then nothing of importance that really got kept in history. Probably a lot of random fights, but nothing too major. Sort of continued until about 4,000 years ago, which for reasons no one really knows, the Indians from India showed up, colonized North Australia, interbred with the indigenous. So indigenous who are from North Australia share 7% of DNA from Indians, and they introduced the dingo, and then nothing happened of importance until white Australians rocked up, colonized it, did a whole heap of genocide, a lot of genocide, just kept doing a genocide. Then they had a little fight at Eureka. Then they fought the Americans in Brisbane, did a couple of race riots, and then that's about it. And then we get to modern day.
I'm so proud of this country. Jesus.
You could probably sum up all of Australian history in like a 30-minute episode. Everything that's important that needs to happen, you could sum it up in 30 minutes.
Genocide, colonization, genocide.
Yeah, pretty much. There was also a race riot that was one of the rare race riots that wasn't bad, where it was the United States military stationed a bunch of troops in Queensland and started treating the black Americans like shit, as, you know, you would expect. And the black Americans were supported by the Australians, which was also what I think the Battle of Brisbane was related to, was poor treatment of African Americans, but it was also just the general consensus with the Americans was they were oversexed and overpaid, is the term for it. So they banged too many women and they got paid too much, and the Australians fucking hated them for it because we were paid like shit. And yeah, we still are. But then the African Americans did a
genocide?
They held a mutiny, and the Australians supported them, and then the US came in and basically killed them all and wiped it from history, with the exception of, I believe, FDR, future President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Though it might have been, no, it was LBJ, sorry. LBJ, guy who has a big dick. There's White House recording.
I forgot he used to just do helicopters.
There's audio recording of him ordering pants on, like White House audio recording of him ordering pants and talking about how big his dick is. But he recorded it, so that's sort of how I know it, and it became cultural history in Australia of that time. Just the United States just killed an entire platoon of African Americans, or, you know, disappeared them. And it wasn't until 6 years ago an Australian historian started digging into it and started finding the records of it, and it started becoming history and talked about in Australian history. I'm not American. I don't know if America has ever talked about this, but Australia talked about it. We've talked about it a lot. So if nothing else, there's an interesting dark part of American history. As I said, 50% of the audience is American. Did you know you just wiped out an entire platoon of African Americans in Australia? We know. It was
we fucking
Townsville,
remember.
I think it was done in Townsville. It was Townsville or Cairns.
Of course, it's fucking
Yeah.
Townsville.
Well, we didn't do it. A rare ethnic cleansing Australia didn't do. Woo! Little
bar.
victories. A friend of mine bought land, like rural land, and he was sending us all the pictures of the land, and he was like, "This is a billabong. They slaughtered the entire indigenous tribe of this billabong." And it's like, "Yeah, that sounds about right." And yeah, he was like, "Yeah, that wasn't a fun thing to hear." Just, this is the genocide billabong, and now I own it. I own the genocide billabong, where hundreds of people were just slaughtered.
Moral of the story is, French history is weird, Australian history is weird, American history is weird, and also Warhammer has Arthurian history in it.
Pretty fucking miserable. History's
God.
sad. It's fun, and then it gets sad. It gets real sad real quick. Why can't we live in just like a nice little country that just like an island came out of nowhere, and we just colonized the island? No one lived there. No one got genocided, and we could just be like, this was nice. No one died. No, we have to live on Genocide Island.
Well, technically, genocide continent.
No one.
Which is kind of worse than genocide
No
country.
one can agree what a continent is or how many continents there are. There is somewhere between 3 to 9 continents.
Shit.
Okay, we'll actually end this episode. Okay. So that was today's episode. I don't know how much of that will be kept in. This is 2 hours and 16 minutes on a recording, and a decent chunk of it's going to get cut out. But thank you for watching. Next, we'll be back covering the Gene Stealer cults, as I promised last week. And thank you for tuning in. Remember to like it if you liked it. Thank you to all the people that have been supporting us. It's awesome. It's awesome seeing people return the same guys. I'll write down your name someday. And yeah, if you haven't subscribe, and we'll catch you next week. Sorry we're late, by the way. That was my fault. I got into Victoria 3. Corgi, you going to say goodbye?
Yeah.
This is where you say goodbye.
I'm trying to brain think, man. It's not easy. I'm not charismatic. I'm clumsy. But yes, thank you all for tuning in. It's good to see that you all like my art. It's genuinely a big ego boost, and I enjoy that encouragement. So thank you all, and I hope that next episode my notes will be more coherent.
Yeah, they won't be so based on years and having to track a timeline. They're just going to be, this is these people and this is what they do. Rather than, this happened in this year, and then 3 years later this happened, and then 3 years later this happened. It's going to be easier. Thank you, and goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Like, I can recount a lot of history of, like, Lord of the Rings. Like, I can summon, or not history of Lord of the Rings, but, you know, I know the Valar, Maya. I can pull those names. I worked with a kid for 3 years. He was a student. I saw him, like, 2 times a week for 3 years, and I consistently called him by his brother's name. I almost never called him the correct name.
And he was just like, yeah, okay, that is my name now.
And, like, yeah, he would respond. I would call him his brother's name, and he'd go, that's not my name, but I know that you're talking to me. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. I am.
Did you ever even teach his brother?
Yeah, they were twins, but they weren't identical twins, so they looked different. One was blonde, one was brown hair.
German.
They were very different people as well. They were distinctly 2 different human beings, and I only ever call them by one name.
Okay, but at least they were the same gender, right?
Yeah, they were both boys.
Okay, because I was gonna say, it'd be like, fuck it, you're looking at someone whose name is Wanda, and you're like, hey, Peter.
Okay.
Peter?
So, there was another student in that class who had the same name as him. And I always got the other student's name correct, but I would never get the brother's name correct.
This is the real reason you started a podcast, because you only have to worry about
I'm so
fictional
glad
names.
I don't work in schools anymore. Just having to come back into, like, the school and be like, who started a fight with who on Facebook? And then the other teachers be like, it was this person, they were angry about this, and then this has happened. I'm like, cool. It's like watching Game of Thrones, but you only watch, like, every 4th episode of Game of Thrones, because I didn't work there full time. So I had to get updates on the political intrigue of what was going on.
Oh, okay, Cersei's on the Iron Throne now. What about Robert Baratheon? Oh, a boar.
So, the Battle of Baden Hill happened around 500 CE, do you know CE?
Fuck no.
Okay. So, you've got...
Christ emerged?
No, you've got AD and BC, right? Before Christ and...
After death?
Fucking... You know that's not true. We had this conversation while you were here, like 6 weeks ago.
I've already forgotten.
AD, Anno Domini, the year of the Lord.
Anno Domini.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, like that game, Anno.
Yes. So CE is the updated, CE and BCE is the updated removing religion from our years. So it's before Common Era and Common Era. It also...
I don't know why I thought
It
you were
also
about to
works
say before
because
Common
Jesus was born about like 10 years BC. So, you know, he wasn't born in the year of our Lord. He was born before Christ.
Damn, he was before himself?
Jesus just went back in time and preempted himself. Well,
Let's be fucking honest. He would.
there was a good episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds where they get into Khan and that people keep deleting Khan from existence like time travelers and killing him, and then he just starts popping up at different locations in time, and that's why when Khan shows up within Star Trek lore is a different year every single time because time travelers keep killing him, so then he just pops up 10 years prior. All I'm saying is maybe Jesus was born at 1 Anno Domini and was murdered and then subsequently reinserted back into the timeline 10 years prior. I wouldn't really call Indiana Jones
Stranger
a
things have
family
happened.
classic. Like, I mean, it's family friendly in a sense,
Yeah.
but... And, like, I saw it because of my family, but I wouldn't really call it a family classic, especially considering the amount of times they've tried to bring Indiana Jones back and it just doesn't have the cultural significance of, say, a Star Wars, where everyone wants to go watch a Star Wars, where Indiana Jones, they're like, we did a 4th Indiana Jones film, and everyone goes, eh. And then they do a 5th Indiana Jones film, and everyone goes, nah. No one cares about Indiana Jones.
Yeah, not even Harrison Ford. He's just like, please, just let me retire. I already killed off one of my characters. Let me kill the other one off too.
The only film I've ever seen Harrison Ford excited to go back to is Blade Runner, which is another, we're going to bring that back, this classic film. And everyone was like, I don't fucking care. And I love Blade Runner 2049. I saw it in theaters. It's better than the original. It's a fantastic film. But making a sequel was a baffling decision because no one gives a shit.
Yeah, I haven't even seen either one of them yet.
I showed my wife the first one and she was like, I don't like this movie. And I'm like, fair.
All I know about it is the paper unicorn.
Yeah, I was started learning origami and my goal was to be able to make a paper unicorn, and then I just never got there. I could make a paper crane really well, and then I just stopped and I probably couldn't do it anymore. I learned how to I learned how to make origami because of Ghost in the Shell. I watched an anime that changed my life so much that it just was like, I need to learn origami now.
And the best part is, you were inspired to do origami from 2 movies featuring robots and humanity at the center of the premise.
The origami and the Ghost in the Shell is from the 2nd season of the TV show. 2nd gig. Standalone complex 2nd gig. There's a character who makes paper cranes.
I always remember paper cranes because of the old story. If you make 1,000, I think you get your wish granted.
I probably didn't make that, but I probably made over 100. I think they bring up that story in the episode.
I'm just imagining, like, the TV show Arthur with horrendously offensive, stereotypical French speech.
Almost certainly in there. It's an old show.
Oh my god.
Isn't fuck, what's her name? One of the kids wears a beret and she's all like, oh yes, France, city of love.
I have no fucking clue. I never watched Merlin.
Arthur.
That's the one I meant, sorry.
Okay.
I never watched
I
either
was
of
thinking
them.
about the Aardvark.
Oh shit. I do not remember, but I'm pretty sure... Oh, it was that fucking... I think I know the girl that it would have been.
You know what goes fucking hard? Is I had been at a party before where, everyone's drunk and some people are on drugs and, like, the music is playing really loud and someone just puts on the Arthur theme song. And all of a sudden, it's like 40 people at the top of their lungs just go, everybody when they're walking down the street. It's great. It's a great vibe. Irish needs to get its pounds back, or its currency back, so they can put my fucking aunt back on the Irish 20 pound. I think she was on the 20 pound.
Oh, hell
Yeah.
yeah.
Or the Catholic Church just make her a fucking saint. Jesus Christ. She's beatified. Make her a fucking saint so I can claim descendancy from sainthood. Fucking bastards.
If that ever happens, you know what's going to be next on the podcast.
Yeah.
Descended from the great saint. I can't even fault you, I would totally do that too. I used to be excited when I found out that apparently, distantly, I am related to Priscilla Presley. And then I was like, oh, Elvis is not good.
Yeah. See, most people, they like claim relation to some sort of celebrity, and they're like, oh yes, this, and it's maybe they are, or it's just like a cultural tailing down. The Catholic Church themselves went, let's find this person's family, and then they rocked up my grandmother's door and was like, hey, you're the oldest living relative to this woman on the way of sainthood. My claim to sainthood has been verified by the Catholic Church themselves. Give me my sainthood.
Saint Che. Oh my god. I don't know why, but Saint Che just sounds like it would be like a rapper name.
If I am descended from sainthood, it means that I am inherently a holy person, and I am the least holy person. That's not true. There was that one pope that just had constant parties and put brothels, hired prostitutes into the church, and he got kicked out. He wasn't a particularly popular pope.
Hell yeah,
His
I
official
like that
record,
guy.
I believe, is he is listed as being a shameful blot on the Catholic Church. Which, that's it, huh? That's what did it. The guy who hired consensual prostitutes. That's the shameful blot on the Catholic Church. Interesting.